They called it a closed session. 12 seats, sealed doors, no record kept, the kind of gathering the faith of the Radiant Path convened when it needed to decide something it did not yet want history to know it had decided. Veylan Drace arrived alone, which surprised them. They had expected an entourage, the full weight of his office carried in by attendants. Instead, one gaunt man in indigo robes, a leather satchel worn at the strap, and hands that cast their own light. He had not slept in 4 days. The binding scars across his knuckles had grown bright enough in the archive's final hours that he had stopped needing the chamber's illumination to read. He had read by his own hands, alone in the spherical chamber, while the geometric object above him shifted through its endless configurations, and he had understood, line by line, glyph by rearranging glyph, that everything he had built his faith upon was not wrong so much as incomplete, in a way that changed everything. The 12 seats were filled when he entered the conclave chamber. High Confessor Aldrin Mast occupied the seat directly opposite the lectern, a heavy-set man in his mid-70s with a shaved head and deep-set amber eyes behind thick diagnostic lenses. His white robes immaculate with gold-circuited hems of the highest grade, a relic pendant of dark, iridescent progenitor material resting against his sternum, worn smooth by 40 years of anxious handling. The chamber's walls pulsed with the faint blue-white rhythm of progenitor veins, a pulse that had grown measurably stronger in the 3 weeks since the archive's activation. Beside Mast, theologian Sarah Vial sat with her data stylus turning slowly between her fingers, watching Veylan with the careful stillness of someone who had already guessed what was coming and had not yet decided how to receive it. And at the chamber's edge, not seated, junior clerics did not sit at the conclave table, stood Tessith Karen, her leather-bound notation tablet already open, her ink-dark fingers already moving. She knew this room's acoustics, she knew which seats creaked, she knew what she had been sent here to do. Veylan set the satchel on the lectern. He removed the Codex, not the original, which remained in the archive's spherical chamber where it belonged, but his complete translation, bound in carbon weave, 340 pages of his own hand. He did not open it immediately. He looked at the 12 faces arranged in their ring of pale alloy seats, and he said, "I have completed the translation, all of it, not the fragments we have worked from for 800 years, the complete text." The silence that followed was the kind that precedes a verdict. He opened the Codex to the first page and began to read. The progenitors did not ascend. The doctrine of the radiant departure, the faith's central article, the theology around which every relic, every prayer, every ordination had been structured for 8 centuries, was built on a translation of 11 glyphs taken from a text of 40,000. The remaining 39,989 glyphs said something else entirely. They said, "We are not leaving." They said, "We are becoming the infrastructure." They said, "We are distributing ourselves across every system, every artifact, every fragment of our making, and we will sleep there until the conditions for return are met." They said, "We are not gods who departed. We are a mind that went to sleep inside the things you would inherit." The chamber's walls pulsed. It was subtle at first, the blue-white veins brightening almost imperceptibly, the way a fire brightens when you add fuel. Veylan noticed it. Tessith noticed it. Aldrin Mast noticed it and said nothing, his hand moving to the pendant at his throat. Veylan read on. He read the return protocol, the reassembly sequence, the conditions required, the nature of the conduit. He did not say Serethi's name. He did not need to. Every theologian in the room understood what a fully bound conduit meant. 3 of them had been present at the Faith's emergency session when the first reports arrived from the sunken archive. They had classified those reports. They had sealed the record. They had told themselves the gap between the archive's activation and the doctrine's foundations was a matter of interpretation. It was not a matter of interpretation. Tessith Karen's fingers had not stopped moving since the first page. She was not taking notes for the faith's record. The notation tablet's microglyph surface was an encrypted transmission interface, and she had been transmitting to the ledger since the moment Veylan opened the Codex. By page 200, the complete translation existed in the Trading House Intelligence Directorate's archives, sealed and redundant, and beyond any conclave's power to suppress. She did not look up from the tablet. She did not look at Veylan. She turned one page of her own shorthand and kept writing. Aldrin Mast stood. He did not shout. High confessors do not shout. But his voice carried the particular register of a man who has decided that certainty is more effective than volume. He said, "This translation is incomplete." He said, "The archive interface is a progenitor construct designed to deceive human cognition." He said, "The Archon's binding scars are evidence of contamination, not illumination, and this session should be suspended pending a doctrinal review of his fitness to present." Veylan looked at him across the lectern and said nothing. He held up his right hand, palm outward. The binding scars blazed, gold-white light filling the chamber's near half, casting hard shadows from the lectern's carved sigil across the stone floor. He said, "The contamination is 30 years old. The translation is what it is." And then he turned the page and kept reading. The pendant at Mast's throat began to pulse. It was the blue-white rhythm of the walls, the same frequency, the same interval. Mast looked down at it. The room looked at Mast. The fragment of dark iridescent progenitor material in its gold housing was doing something it had never done in 40 years of daily wear. It was waking up. It was answering the reading. It was answering Serethi's binding, transmitted through the network, felt here in this closed chamber 7 systems, away from the woman whose scars had lit the signal. Mast grabbed the pendant in his fist. The pulsing continued through his fingers, light bleeding between them. Sarah Vale set down her data stylus. She said quietly, "Aldrin, let it go." He did not let it go. What followed was not a debate. Debates have structure: proposition, response, concession, conclusion. What happened in the Faith's closed conclave chamber on Aethon Prime in the 47th minute of Veylan Drace's reading was an institution discovering in real time that it had been built on a floor with a trapdoor, and that the trapdoor had just opened. 4 of the 12 theologians walked out before Veylan reached page 112. They filed through the heavy alloy doors in silence, their gold-circuited hems catching the amber light, their faces arranged in the particular blankness of people who have decided that what they have just heard cannot be allowed to have happened. The doors sealed behind them with the sound of a verdict being recorded in a language the Faith had spent 800 years refusing to learn. 2 more followed at page 190, when Veylan read the passage describing the relic network as a distributed synaptic architecture, when he used the word neurons, and the analogy landed in the room like a blade. The relic pendants worn by 3 of the remaining theologians had begun to pulse in unison now, their blue-white light catching in the facets of their gold housings, casting small moving shadows on the white robes and the pale alloy seats and the faces of people who had built their lives on the assumption that the things they worshipped were silent. Aldrin Mast was the last to leave. He stood at the chamber's centre for a long moment after the final walkout, the pendant still pulsing in his closed fist, and he said to Veylan, "You have not translated a truth. You have translated a catastrophe." And then he said, "The session is suspended." And then he said, "Your translation will be reviewed by a doctrinal panel before any further dissemination." And then he walked out. The heavy alloy doors sealed behind him. 3 people remained: Veylan at the lectern, Serethi in her seat, her data stylus still, her hands folded. Tessith at the wall, her tablet closed now, her grey-blue eyes on Veylan, with an expression he could not read and would not have time to read correctly. The walls pulsed. The empty seats caught the blue-white light and held it, as if the chamber itself had not noticed the people were gone. Tessith had not looked up from the tablet until the last door sealed. Now she looked at Veylan. He was still at the lectern, both hands flat on the closed Codex, the binding scars casting their gold-white light across the carbon weave cover. He had not watched the walkouts with grief or with triumph. He had watched them the way a cartographer watches a coastline recede into fog, with the particular attention of someone who knows the map is already drawn, and the fog changes nothing about the territory. Serethi said, "What do we do now?" She asked it the way people ask questions they already know the answer to, not seeking information, but seeking the sound of the answer spoken aloud. Because spoken aloud, it becomes real in a way that private certainty cannot. Veylan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "The same thing we have always done. We follow the text." He did not say, "I have just watched the institution I gave my life to choose its own blindness." He did not say, "The doctrinal panel will suppress this for 6 months, perhaps a year, and by then it will not matter because the relics across 100 systems are already waking, and no panel's seal can quiet a mind that has begun to remember itself." He did not say, "Tessith has already transmitted everything." He did not say any of it. The walls said it for him. The ledger had the translation now. Every word Veylan had read in this sealed chamber, every glyph he had spent 30 years learning to see, every revelation that had just fractured the faith's senior conclave, all of it existed in a parallel archive beyond any theological panel's reach. Tessith had built that escape route years before she understood what it would carry. The faith could suppress the session's record. It could not suppress the morning. Outside the sealed chamber, in the long corridor of white stone where relic cases lined the walls, each one a fragment of dark, iridescent progenitor material in its gold-framed housing, each one labelled in the faith's script, each one now pulsing with the same blue-white rhythm as the walls inside. A junior attendant stood at his post and watched the cases light up one by one, and did not know what to do with what he was seeing. He had been posted here for 6 years. The relics had never done this before. The faith of the Radiant Path had been built on the assumption that the progenitors were absent, that their artifacts were holy because they were remnants of a presence that had departed, relics of a god that had moved on. A relic derives its power from distance, from loss, from the certainty that what made it sacred is no longer here to be questioned. What the Codex had just told 12 theologians in a sealed chamber, and what the pulsing relics in the antechamber corridor were now confirming to anyone with eyes, was that the progenitors had never been absent at all. They had been listening. Veylan stood at the empty lectern. He looked at the 12 vacant seats. He thought about the 30 years he had spent in the archive's outer chambers, learning a language that no living human had spoken in 8,000 years, driven by the conviction that the faith's fragments were a partial reading of something larger, something true, something that deserved to be known whole. He had been right. He had also been, in ways he was only now beginning to measure, catastrophically naive about what knowing whole would cost. He had given the faith the truth it was built to receive and watched it refuse the gift. But the gift was already beyond its reach to refuse. The ledger had it. The waking relics in the antechamber corridor had it. The pulsing walls of the throne spire's ecclesiastical wing had it. And 7 systems away, in the body of a young woman with close-cropped dark hair and luminous scars spreading from her skull, The signal that had lit every pendant and every relic case and every progenitor vein in this building was still broadcasting, steady and indifferent to the faith's opinion of it. The cartographer had drawn the map. He had drawn it truthfully, completely, at the cost of 30 years and the light in his own hands. The territory was already changing beneath it, had been changing since the moment Serethi Voss first pressed her palm to a progenitor surface, and something ancient and patient recognized the bloodline it had been waiting for. Veylan could not stop that. No conclave could stop it. The only question left was whether the institution that had built its entire architecture on the silence of sleeping gods could survive the sound of them waking up. He left the Codex on the lectern. He did not take it with him when he finally walked out of the chamber into the blazing antechamber corridor, past the pulsing relic cases and the stunned attendant and the heavy alloy doors that the faith would seal by morning. He left it because it did not belong to him. It had never belonged to him. It had belonged to the progenitors, and then to the truth, and now to whatever came next. Veylan Drace walked out of the faith's closed conclave and into a galaxy that had just learned its gods were not gone. They were simply not finished.